feels like there's no number one driver in Ferrari. And we really thought, or even last year, it was like Leclerc is better than Sainz. He's the number one, even if they're not saying it. But it just feels like the two of them are just kind of there and thereabouts. And I don't know if that's at the detriment of the team because they're not able to then prioritize one. Because even if you look into the stats, they're so close in terms of their times at that.
I mean, the thing is, you wouldn't, it's to tell any driver that there's going to be a number one or something like that. I mean, for racing drivers, but Formula One drivers in particular, the ego is the size of Jupiter. And whoever gets told, which based on last year would likely be Sainz, that they're a number two, I think it wouldn't be very productive. I mean, if you remember that when Max and Carlos were teammates at Toro Rosso, there was a lot of rumblings going on. And they actually had to almost bring in an enforcer in John Booth to keep control of them. So I don't think that. I think if one of them gets told that they're in that position, that they will be immediately looking for another team.
Hello and welcome back to On Track GP, where today we are previewing Spa, the Belgian Grand Prix. It's maybe my favourite race of the year. Always exciting, many overtakes, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm joined today by brilliant driver, lovely man, great set of glasses, Richard Bradley. Thank you.
We're being kind about the glass. I know you're lying.
No, I like it. And Pokemon t-shirt, which I'm wearing today as well. Thank you, as always, for coming and joining us. It's always good to have a professional outlook on things ahead for this week. Firstly, how are you? Are you jet lagged this time?
No, I'm not jet lagged this time. No, I'm good. Watched Oppenheimer yesterday. And Barbie.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the Barbie camp, so we're already disagreeing. But look, so we're going racing in Spa, 44 laps or 120 minutes. Why do they do that timed thing? Particularly, why is that more important at Spa this week?
So basically, it's just to make things kind of rational and take into account, daylight and stuff like that. When it's a dry race or a normal race, it's quite okay. But obviously, we have a lot of safety cars because there's a good chance of rain in Spa, as we all know. And they don't want to have it extending for too long. Basically, there's obviously TV, commercial rights, etc. So if we do have half the race under safety car, then there's a good chance we won't be able to get the 44 lap distance done in the time period. In the reasonable commercial period. So then it just goes to time basically.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we do get all 44 laps because we want to see the racing. I'm really excited. And also this week we have, I think it's the third of the season sprint race. So let's just quickly confirm we're on the same page in terms of what happens. So Friday we'll have practice one, only one practice session. They'll qualify later on in the Friday for the race on Sunday. Then on Saturday, they'll have a sprint shootout qualifying, and then the sprint race, where the top 8 positions end up with points going down. First place 8, second place 7, all the way down, and then the race on Sunday. Have I got that right?
I think so, but honestly, it changes so often. I need to look at the schedule. I'm pretty sure you're on.
Well, let's go through the weekend loosely then. So the main thing that always seems to come up is that the drivers only get one practice session before they have to then drive these cars flat out for qualifying on the Friday. What kind of impact does that have, only going out for a maximum of an hour before you have to go and qualify?
Well, in Spa, it's actually a massive impact because Spa is the longest circuit on the calendar. So you naturally just do less laps there. When you're at the Red Bull Ring, a lap is 105 or something like this. Spa, you'll be looking at in quali sim probably at 145. It's 40 seconds longer per lap. Now you're thinking, oh, okay, about time lapse and stuff. Hang on, you've got your out laps for every run that you do. You've got your in lap for every run that you do. You've got your install laps. You've got your prep laps. And especially with Spa as well, because the nature of the circuit, tire degradation again is huge. It's famously huge at Spa. So it's actually very, very tricky. I think 1 hour they're going to be hard pushed. I mean, don't get me wrong, everybody's driven this track many times, especially in the junior categories and everything, but it's a proper confidence circuit and you can't just go and smash it straight away. And there is a very big element of risk at Spa. Even though it does have a lot of tarmac runoffs in places like Pouhon, you can definitely have a shunt in Spa.
Yeah, I saw a crazy stat that last week in Hungary, compared with this week in Spa, the average speed around the track is 40 kilometers an hour quicker at Spa. I mean, that is crazy numbers in terms of, and as you were saying, some of these corners you're looking up at the sky or you don't know what's around the corner. I mean, as you said, they know the track because they know it a lot, but just in terms of the speed that they're going out, and it's so much longer.
And the other thing with Spa as well, it's not because the straights are really long. I mean, you've got two pretty long straights, but it's not like somewhere like Baku or Vegas where the straight just goes on forever. You know, it's because the corners are very, very high speed. Obviously, Eau Rouge is the one everyone talks about, but in a Formula One car, it's quite easy flat. But you've got Pouon, you've got Stabilo, you've got Blanchimont. Sorry, not Stabilo, Campus. You know, these are corners which you need to build up to. So it's such a short amount of time. It's very, very tricky.
So one practice session on the Friday where they're not going to really actually get that many laps in. So this could be one of the most important practice sessions of the whole season, really, particularly at the long track. Then we qualify on a Friday afternoon for the race on Sunday. And we'll get into some predictions and that sort of thing later. Now we expect quality to be, I say normal. We've had some amazing qualifying sessions this year. Arguably, the qualifying has actually been better than the racing, I think, this season in terms of how we've seen some grid mix-up. You know, Hulkenberg, for example, just doing crazy things in qualifying. Then we move to Saturday. Sprint shootout qualifying and sprint race. Now, I feel like the sprint race is controversial. It's splitting opinion across the board in F1. And not only that, but we've also had the new change occasionally, which we experienced last week in Hungary, where trying different tyres in qualifying. So it feels like this season they're trying all sorts of different things. What are your general opinions of the Saturday, the sprint Saturday?
I like what Formula One is doing at the minute. I think that, you know, it was very stagnant for a while and they're trying to improve the show. And, you know, disregarding Max this year, they're doing a pretty good job of it. I actually thought some people didn't like it, but I thought qualifying for Hungary was actually really exciting. But I think that the sprint, the idea and the concept of it is a good idea, but they need to find a way to make it a bit more exciting and try some other stuff. And I think that this is the one where they should try stuff. You know, a couple of ideas that I've had in my mind. Two things I'd really like to see Formula One try is I'd like to see, number one would be reverse DRS.
Oh, you've said about this and I love it.
I think.
Oh, tell me about it.
Reverse DRS would be something that would be really, really cool because basically, if you're a second behind the car in front, you get DRS, or more than a second behind. But when you're within a second, then you don't get DRS. So then you actually have to do the overtake properly. But it means that there's a lot of pressure on the driver in front of you not to make a mistake because you're going to be, you know, the field is going to be much more bunched up. I think that's something worth trying. I mean, I don't like DRS as a concept as a whole, being a racing driver, a purist and everything, but it's a necessary evil right now with how hard it is to follow. And the other thing I'd like to see them try, especially on a track like Spa, is why don't they mandate the SUPERSOFT tyre for the sprint?
Bring it back. Bring back the SUPERSOFT.
Exactly. Because then there's an element of strategy. You have to work out with very little practice time. Do you push like hell from the start and then make a pit stop and then come back out? Or do you conserve your tyres for the whole thing? And there was a Formula 2 race where Charles Leclerc started to make a big name for himself in Bahrain. He was the first driver to actually make a pit stop during a sprint race in Formula 2, put on new boots, fell to like P15 or something, ended up winning the race.
So the last sprint race we had was in Austria, and that was so good and so exciting. And everybody was like, oh, we hate sprint races. And then that happened and it was amazing. But it was amazing for basically the same reason that you've just said, because there was a forced pit stop or there was a change of strategy because it rained. And we saw some people go, oh, we're just going to stick to the mediums or whatever they were on and try and get through this. But people like Hulkenberg pitted at the most beautiful time, put the inters on, and then just cut his way through the field and ended up, I think, in sixth or something. So it's that change of strategy rather than just go out on softs and they're going to drive and, you know, whatever. Okay, cool. The people that are going to win. If we force a strategy on them, it makes it more interesting.
That's the thing, because the problem is drivers are always going to have in the back of their heads, especially the front running drivers. They're going to have in the back of their heads the race the next day. So they're not going to want to destroy their upgrades if they've only got one set. They're going to want to be conservative because the bigger points are on Sunday. But, you know, going back to Austria, there's a good, I mean, we're at Spa. This place is infamous for random rain. Yeah. And, you know, not only that, it randomly rains on one half of the circuit and then it's drying up.
So big.
So big. Remember Kimi Räikkönen and Lewis Hamilton having that amazing battle in 2008 where they stayed out in slicks because it was like this. The other interesting thing with Spa as well, compared to other circuits, is a pit stop in each circuit is actually very, very different because of the delta of the pit lane. So for how long the pit lane is, and also the speed that the cars are actually doing as they go past the pit lane. So as an example, Baku pit lane is a very big delta because the speed past the pit lane is normally, I don't know, 220 miles an hour, something like that. Whereas the pit lane delta at Spa is actually very small because the last corner being the bus stop is very slow. The source is very slow. And so that means you actually lose less time relatively in the pits versus the other circuits.
So the speed of pit stops is going to be so crucial.
Exactly.
So we don't want to see Charles Leclerc do another 9.4 stop this week.
Well, what it means is that because the pit lane delta is shorter, because you lose less time in the pits, it does open up more strategy opportunities. So I'd like to see something like that. If we could just see a way to mix up the sprint a little bit and experiment with it, I think that could be quite interesting.
I agree. I think it has legs, but it's sort of 50% of the way there. They're still figuring it out. And you know, I'm not closing the door on it, but they need to make it as, basically, listen to us. Fix it, F1. Let's move on to Sunday, which then should just be, you know, imagine Saturday never happened. We qualified on the Friday and we're into the race on Sunday. So let's have a look at the teams. And so let's look at the team that I imagine will do pretty well, as they always do, Red Bull. I mean, they're just on another planet.
They're on another planet, and especially Max at the minute. Max is just looking phenomenal, and you know we can kind of predict who's going to get pole, who's going to get pole for the sprint, going to win the sprint. You know, everything. It's kind of a formality at the minute, and you know, as I said, it's pretty cool because we're witnessing something pretty special. But the reality is you know, who's going to beat him? And you can't see
who genuinely who can beat Max Verstappen in a minute.
His teammates not. Let's just be honest about that. Max has got the legs over him now, and okay, Checo had a good Hungarian race and everything, but there's still, you know, you can't see him beating him in a straight fight. The only hope that we have is that one of the teams can bring along upgrades which get them to a level. And at the minute, you can't really see that happening at least this weekend.
So Max is now on 7 straight victories, 2 away from Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 in a row. I think he's probably going to break that record, isn't he?
Yeah, I think it's quite likely.
Do you think he's the sort of character that will be thinking and aware of that? Or do you think he'll just be going, no, I'm just driving?
No, I don't think he'll care. Honestly,
really?
As drivers, we don't really care about any of that. It just takes your mind away from focusing and going fast.
So you don't find yourself almost chasing records and that kind of thing? Would you sort of deliberately keep that away?
I mean, maybe in the off season you have a bit of an ego and you start looking at stuff in your free time and everything like that and thinking, yeah, I can do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons that Lewis is still out into for that next championship, I'm sure. But honestly, when you're at a race weekend, when you're in the car, you really don't care about it.
Yeah, interesting. Max also made a little bit of a joke. He's just won his 44th win of his career and said, I really need to get off that number because that's Lewis's number as soon as possible. I quite liked it. He sort of had a little tip of the hat. As you said, Sergio had a good, much better Hungarian Grand Prix. This should be a race that Red Bull dominate and get a 1-2 out with that car, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they got good straight line speed, which is important as far, but they also have a good aero package. So yeah, I can't see them being caught from this.
Yeah,
we'll
get to predict
unless we get some weather. Which is very possible.
It's going to rain at some point.
Yeah, it always rains at Spa.
Spa is a magnet for water.
Yeah.
Moving on to Mercedes. Generally, Lewis Hamilton, it was just tough to see that fall from pole position straight down into 4th, I think he went to, or 5th. I can't remember where he fell straight away, but that was just tough. I really had such high expectations, and it was over in like 6 meters.
Yeah. But I think again, especially if it's wet, I think that he's realistically the only one who could give Max a serious run for his money. We all know how good Lewis is in the wet.
But in terms of ability in the wet.
And, you know, I think that's honestly, that's going to be his only hope to be with Max this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Bull is so quick. Lewis even said that that the Red Bull car is making the F1 grid look like F2 cars in comparison. Toto said that, sorry. It's crazy how quick they are. But the Mercedes generally has been doing okay. George feels a little bit like it's been, you know, qualified really badly in Hungary, but actually did have an okay race in the end.
Yeah, Silverstone, he didn't have the best qualifying Silverstone, but again, his race pace looked really strong, and his race pace in Hungary looks strong. I think if George qualifies, you know, in the top 2 rows, I think he could be a dark horse for second.
Yeah, interesting. Let's move on to McLaren, because I think Mercedes-McLaren fight could be pretty tight this weekend, particularly at a track like Spa. McLaren have been unbelievable. And we had a little conversation about this on the podcast yesterday, but for me, the most exciting thing about McLaren is that they were good at 2 completely different circuits in Silverstone and Hungary. It wasn't like they only have a car that's good in a straight line or good on heavy braking. They seem like this upgrade has changed everything for McLaren, and they could be very, very good this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm really excited to see how they go. And as I said, the good thing was at Silverstone, which I was quite surprised about, was that they didn't actually fade off with how high the deg was. And Spa is, as I said, very very high deg as well. So I think it could be quite exciting. And I'm quite enthusiastic about McLaren because, as I said, we're privileged to be able to watch some of the older statesmen still going ahead. And your Lewis's, your Fernando's, etc., etc. But we're actually seeing a really good group for the future coming through. And you're looking at Lando, you're looking at Oscar. This is going to be the next generation who's going to be taking the fight to Max. So it's actually really exciting to see these guys performing how they are.
Yeah.
And it's good for the sport. So long may it continue.
100%. I'm loving Oscar Piastri. I'm loving everything. I was never really sure because I didn't, you never know with the rookies if they're going to be really good or unfortunately it's just not going to work out for them. But Oscar, what he's doing as a rookie is incredible, and it's his character that seems to be so impressive. He's 22, man. Like he's acted like he's done this for 10 years.
Yeah, honestly, he's like an Australian just chilled out on the beach with a can of Foster's or something. It's very very impressive. But the thing is, any driver who's in Formula One or gets to that point, none of them are bad drivers. They've all accomplished something in some part of the sport. So in every category, they've proven themselves to some degree. And the key is though, how can you adapt to an individual racing car? And there are some cars which suit people better, some cars which don't. Prime example was Danny Rick. When he was at that McLaren, it just didn't suit him. And different categories suit different drivers. But the one thing which is impressive about Oscar is that he's been a champion in every category he's driven in the first year. And so this is really exciting. And this is also something which goes back to one of our previous podcasts. When Liam Lawson eventually does get to Formula One, watch out for him because he's had a similar sort of trajectory in terms of, as I mentioned it on the podcast, with rookie wins and everything.
Yeah.
So that's what's impressive for me is how quickly he's just been able to jump into something and adapt to.
It does feel like the future of F1 is in safe hands with these young guys because there was a time where I wasn't entirely sure. Maybe the season of like 21, it just felt like the older guys, it felt like Lewis and Max were dominating so much, and it was just sort of all kind of there. And I was like, who's going to be the next breakthrough? Is it going to be Lando? It doesn't feel like that's happening at the minute. And now suddenly, McLaren are flying. We've got the guys that aren't even in F1 yet that seem to be really exciting. Another name that you brought up is Ollie Behrman in the past, who seems to be a really exciting talent. Talk to me a little bit about him quickly.
He's going to be really, really good. I was at a race helping a Formula 3 driver. And Formula 4 Italy was supporting. And it's a very, very tough category. And I watched this one race with him at Imola, and in 3 laps, I could tell, like, he's going to be seriously good. I actually sent a message to, I've got a WhatsApp group with my schoolmates, with like, I don't know, 20 of us in there. And I sent a message to them on that day saying, if you can now, go find a way to put a bet on Ollie Behrman being a world champion.
Really?
Because the odds would be mega. How many of them did it? I don't know. But every time he does something in Formula 2, I just refer back to that and just send a picture. So no, he's an exciting talent. He's on the Ferrari Driver Academy. He's doing very well in Formula 2. He's got 3 race wins already this year. He's from Chelmsford as well, where I'm living.
Chelmsford boys.
Exactly. So no, he's going to be very exciting for the future. He's not somebody who's probably going to be in F1 next year. I expect they'll keep him in Formula 2 for another year, which is, again, he's very young. So this time, but I know quite a few people who have watched him and worked with him and everything, and they've all been extremely complimentary.
Interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But ultimately, the other thing is that there's only 20 seats.
Yeah.
It really is the absolute pinnacle. So it's as you say, it's so hard to get into F1. You don't get there without being spectacular.
Exactly. And the other thing, that's 20 seats for now. But obviously, we've seen the movements from Andretti. We've seen the movements from High Tech. And, the FIA has basically said that they'll pretty much allow them in and send up to FOM and the teams. But, hopefully, I'm hoping that we get those teams because 24 cars for me sounds a lot better than 20 cars.
Interesting. Let's move on to Aston Martin, who have just sort of been drip and drabbing down, and I think they really could end up the 5th fastest team or 5th in the constructors now this year, which at the beginning of the season seemed crazy because we thought they might even be able to fight with Red Bull.
Honestly, I think the way it's going, I expect Lawrence Stroll is going to make sure that they, as I said, take all of their laptops with them when they go on their summer holidays to try and find the performance they had at the start of the season. Because Aston Martin, especially the way it works, the Formula One team is actually having a direct relation to the actual company model. I mean, their stock value actually and their sales went really a lot better after Bahrain. I think Alonso posted something on Instagram showing this. And as far as the sort of place where when you have a bit of mixed conditions, it's a sort of race that Fernando Alonso can make a difference. You know, with that experience that he has, I wouldn't write them off completely, but in a straight fight, I can't see them doing anything special this weekend.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they start to bring some upgrades to that car, because it does feel like they're starting to fall behind a little bit. Made this point yesterday as well. They've scored 9 points in the last 2 races.
It's pretty terrible. That's really terrible
For a team that really wanted to be second, if not fighting for the top.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. And another team that's not good enough for is my boys Ferrari, who have scored 13 points in the last 2 races. Again, not good enough at all. It feels like there's no number one driver in Ferrari. And we really thought, or even last year, it was like Leclerc is better than Sainz. He's the number one, even if they're not saying it. But it just feels like the two of them are just kind of there and thereabouts. And I don't know if that's at the detriment of the team, because they're not able to then prioritize one. Because even if you look into the stats, they're so close in terms of their times.
I mean, the thing is, you wouldn't, you know, it's to tell any driver that there's going to be a number one or something like that. I mean, for racing drivers, but Formula One drivers in particular, the ego is the size of Jupiter, and you know, whoever gets told, which you know, based on last year, would likely be Sainz that they're a number two. I think wouldn't be very productive. I mean, if you remember that when Max and Carlos were teammates at Toro Rosso, there was a lot of rumblings going on. And they actually had to almost bring in an enforcer in John Booth to keep control of them. So I don't think that. I think if one of them gets told that they're in that position, that they will be immediately looking for another team. But it's just again, they're just, you know, Ferrari's pace is actually not too bad. If you actually take away Leclerc's penalties last week and the pit lane speeding and then the terrible pit stop, he wasn't too far behind that Checo, Piastri, Hamilton battle. But there's no zip about them. You can't see them winning a race this year.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I feel like I say it all the time, but I say, like, oh, this track could be good for Ferrari. Spa should be good for Ferrari because it's, you know, it's generally so quick around the whole thing. But I just feel like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. And it is every race. There's some either strategy or mechanical towards the beginning of the season or human error. And just such stupid mistakes like Charles Leclerc speeding in the pit lane. And the mechanics then dropping a 9.4.
Very easy to speed at the pit lane, though. By the way, I could tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, I've not done it personally, but
I can tell you it's very easy thing to do.
But you think again, I say all the time, do the basics right. But where does that come from? Is it just you just lose focus, or what is the?
No, it's honestly, it's you know, it's very very difficult because you're having to slow down to speed, which is so slow compared to how you've actually been going. Your eyes can't really adapt.
It's 50, isn't it?
It's 80 kilometers.
80 kilometers.
80 kilometers an hour. I think it's 50 miles an hour.
Something, yeah.
Yeah. But it's very, very difficult to actually slow down to that speed because your eyes are used to doing an average speed of what, I don't know, 140, 150 miles an hour. So you quite often hear this when people do like land speed records in cars. You know, they'll go up to 250 odd miles an hour. And then they'll get to 100 miles an hour and think, oh, I can jump out.
Yeah.
Nice, slowly. So honestly, it's literally just getting down to that speed. It's very hard to process. Plus, there's no reference boards. You know, you're not used to it. It's a part of track you've driven the least all weekend. So it's actually an easy thing to do. But on the Ferrari side of things, you know, I've got through being involved in many categories of motorsport, I've had experience with Frederick Vasseur, and he's only come in recently. And he is very, very impressive as a team boss, and the way he's got his junior teams running and everything he's actually been involved with. He's a very, very accomplished individual. And, you know, with an organization like Ferrari, when you've got that many employees and everything, it takes time to implement changes. And a lot of these changes will take a year or two to actually come in. But I think you've got something to look forward to with Fred now at the helm.
I hope so, man. I need something to cheer about. At the moment, I'm just crying.
Something that makes you feel a little bit better, by the way. Fred was actually Lewis's team boss when Lewis won the GP2 championship.
What that? Great stat.
So maybe Fred will be calling his old mate at some point and say, hey, you want to come win your race championship with Ferrari?
Yeah, but it'll probably be at the detriment of my boy Carlos Sainz, unfortunately. I can't see them getting rid of wonder kid Charles Leclerc. We'll see. I wouldn't be anti. I'd love to go and see Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari. It'd be awesome to see him in red. Let's have a look at the other 5 teams. Alpine, I mean, 2 double DNF, really tough. It's just
one of those races where you almost just like, right, boys, just finish.
Yeah.
Please just finish.
Just both cars across the line at the end. If one of you can get in the points, great. But they were quick last year, I think, at Spa. The Alpine. Alonso had a crash with Hamilton, if I don't forget, maybe on lap one. But generally, I think their car was quick over the weekend. So maybe this could be better for them. But this just feels like there's a lot of cars that are quick.
Yeah, it just feels like there's not much zip about it at the minute. It's just kind of a, yeah.
Well, remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. I still want to see a bit of bite between those two French guys that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about a car park fight between Stroll and Gasly. Ocon and Gasly could be interesting one.
Alpha Tauri, Daniel Ricciardo had a good race back. He said something quite funny after. He said when he got hit into the back by Zhou, he said it's like your first NFL game. Someone's going to put in a big tackle in you just to welcome you, which I thought was quite funny. Always tries to see the comedy in things, I guess, Daniel Ricciardo. But actually did have a good drive, out qualified and outdrove or out finished, placed higher than Yuki Tsunoda. So yeah, generally not bad. I think even if he hadn't had that crash though, he wouldn't have been in the points. He might have got 11th or 12th, but he was never going to get.
I mean, to get an AlphaTauri into the points is a very, very good day. That's like almost a day worth celebrating for them at the minute. I think Spa, he'll be a lot better. He's had that first race back, got into the swing of things. And Hungary is not your conventional circuit. It's a very hard one to go back to. As I said, that would be like right in my bottom 5 of tracks I'd want to have a return at, because
Really?
it's so tight, it's so twisty, it's so different. And also physically, it's incredibly demanding. That along with Singapore, I can probably think of the worst too. The Spa is a much more normal circuit, a place where he's driven countless times.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be he should be on paper a lot better at Spa.
Interesting. Well, I hope. I'd love to see Daniel Ricciardo really make something. And don't forget about our bet. Are you regretting it?
I'm going to keep working, mate. I'm going to make up for the £10.
Rich and I have a bet on that he thinks Yuki Tsunoda will finish generally in higher positions throughout the season from now, and I think Daniel Ricciardo will finish higher. So, but we've got £10 on it, so it's worth a lot.
It's a pint and a half in London.
Just. Depends where you go. Alfa Romeo qualified so well, and then it all just went tits, unfortunately for them. Do you see them having any possibility of doing something similar this weekend?
Well, I think there will be a new motivation from it, because to get a result like that, it's big for everybody, and it just gives you a little bit of a zip, even if it's subconsciously. It can make a bit of a difference. So. I'll be interested to see. I heard Martin Brundle say that it's because they're particularly good in 90-degree corners, point and squirt. So unfortunately, Spa doesn't have too many of them. If they're looking for something like that, they're probably going to have to wait until Singapore. But we'll wait and see. I think again, it's nice to have that confidence, especially for Zhou. Okay, he had a terrible start, which it turns out wasn't his fault. Okay, the crash was, but the actual reasons.
Yeah, it was electrical.
It was an electrical issue. And the fact that he was qualified ahead of Bottas, that will do wonders for his confidence. So no, I'm intrigued to see what happens, but I'm not feeling that confident for him.
Yeah, it's difficult to see them scoring any points really this weekend, but they are bringing a new livery for this week.
Which looks smashing, by the way.
Really cool. Yeah. Really, really, really cool. Go check out their new livery. It's really, really nice. Usual story for Haas. Nico Hulkenberg qualifies well and then tumbles down because the car was quick enough. Yeah. I tell you what, I've been slightly disappointed with Kevin Magnussen this season. I thought he was going to be stronger. I think Nico Hulkenberg is showing his class in that again, not really a very good car.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought they'd be a bit closer. They were at the beginning of the season, but Hulkenberg seems to have almost just now jumped to another level. But he just constantly qualifies well. And also the other thing is, Nico is a bit of a renowned master, especially in mixed conditions. We remember where he got his first pole in Brazil, win the Williams. He obviously qualified very well in Canada. So if the weather does come in, have Hulkenberg down as a dark horse.
Interesting. A bit of drama within the Haas camp as well, with Ralf Schumacher pointed the blame at the team boss, Günther Steiner, saying, it would just be good if the team boss made the same demands on himself and on the team as he makes on others. Yikes.
I think, Ralph comes out with a lot of comments. Yeah. Let's put it like that.
We'll leave that one there, shall we? And finishing up with Williams, I mean, Albon managed to actually get a P11 in the end. They didn't look particularly quick, but he kind of Made
kept himself quiet and, did what Albon does.
Yeah, and actually that's such an interesting point as well, because that's what Alpine need to do this weekend.
Yes.
Stay away from the drama. Just if there's an opportunity, sure, go for it, but just stay out of trouble. And Albon did that beautifully.
Again, another under the radar quality weekend from him.
Yeah.
Logan was struggling, and Albon just did his job and didn't make any mistakes and was always there and did exactly what he needed to. And I'm quite excited for Williams this weekend, to be honest, because as I said, there are circuits such as Spa and Monza where you can have a particular package for it. And the smaller teams do sometimes focus on those circuits. Force India, remember them as the main example in 2009.
Mm.
Now, Alex came out and said after Hungary that was a circuit which would not suit their car, and they kind of knew it. So Spa is a lot different to Hungary. So I'm kind of excited to see what they could do here.
Yeah, and it's incredibly quick in a straight line, that car. And Spa's got lots of moments where your foot is on the floor.
Absolutely.
So yeah, fingers crossed. Let's do some quick predictions. Let's leave the sprint for a second. Let's just go for your top three, on assuming that you think Max is going to qualify pole.
Yeah, I mean, should we go for P2, 3, 4?
Why do you do 1, 2, 3, 4? There you go. Do your top four today.
Yeah, because obviously Max is Max for everything, and you'd be foolish to bet against that.
Yep.
I'm gonna predict that there's going to be a bit of weather, and if there's a bit of weather, I think Lewis is going to be P2.
Nice.
I think that then I'm torn. I think that if there is a bit of weather, I think Fernando. Yeah, I'm going to go Fernando. P4.
That's a name I wasn't expecting to hear.
And if there is a bit of weather, I'm going to go Hulkenberg P4. But that's based on a bit of weather.
That is out of nowhere.
If there's a bit of weather.
Interesting.
If it's dry, I can't see that result.
I mean,
definitely
mate, I would. What a final four that'd be insane. I'm going to go Max, Checo, I think, because it's just too good, the car, and his race pace looks good. Then I'm going to go for Lewis, and then I'm going to go for Lando Norris, P4. And
just safe.
Yeah. And last one, who's going to finish P10? Because I was thinking it's interesting. Who's going to nip that last point?
That's an interesting one, actually. That's actually really interesting. Guanyu Zhou.
Wow. I'm going to go Albon.
I think he's going to be higher than that. I think he's going to be higher than 10.
Interesting. Well, leave us your predictions in the comments, and we will be here covering all of it all weekend. Reaction to quali on Friday, live for the sprint on Saturday, and live for the race on Sunday. I hope I've got that right. Yes, I have. That is all from us today. Richard, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I'm really excited for the race. I think, look, Max is probably going to go and do a job, but we'll see. As you said, a bit of weather, it might mix it up. We will see you very soon. We'll be covering it all here on Unchecked GP, so come and join us. If you're not subscribed already, please do. Like the video, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much.